Jake Miller pressed his face against the small window of the transport ship and watched as Centauri Prime grew larger before his eyes. The planet looked like a giant purple jewel floating in space, with 3 silver moons spinning around it like dancers. He had never seen anything so beautiful in his entire life. "Can you believe we're actually here?" Amy Foster whispered from the seat next to him. Her hands shook a little as she held her research tablet. 6 months ago, I was studying beetles in my lab back in Oregon, and now we're going to the most famous school in the galaxy. Jake nodded but kept staring out the window. Back home in Montana, the biggest excitement in his life had been finding a new type of butterfly in the mountains behind his house. Now he was about to meet alien students from dozens of different worlds. His stomach felt like it was full of jumping frogs. The transport ship landed with a soft bump on the Academy's landing pad. Through the window, Jake could see the Galactic Academy stretching out like a crystal city. The buildings seemed to grow right out of the ground, twisting up toward the purple sky like giant glass trees. Students of all shapes and sizes walked along floating pathways that glowed with soft blue light. "Welcome to Centauri Prime," the ship's computer announced in perfect English. "Please gather your belongings and prepare for departure. Temperature is optimal for human life support." Jake and Amy grabbed their bags and walked toward the exit. Jake's bag was heavy with books about Earth's insects and animals. Amy carried a special container that held preserved specimens from her collection back home. They had spent months preparing for this moment. The Academy's welcoming committee waited for them at the bottom of the ship's ramp. Jake's eyes went wide when he saw them. The first alien looked like it was made of living crystal. Its body caught the light from Centauri's sun and threw rainbow colors in all directions. The second alien was tall and thin, with skin that looked like it was made of flowing water. "Greetings, Earth students," the crystal being said in a voice that sounded like wind chimes. "I am Zixathera, from the world of Veltar. This is my study partner, Krell Nox, from Hyperion's third moon." Krell Nox moved forward, and Jake noticed that the alien's feet didn't quite touch the ground. "We have been chosen to guide you through your first days at the Academy," Krell Nox said. His voice sounded like water flowing over rocks. "We understand. This is your species' first time joining our program." Amy stepped forward and tried to smile, even though Jake could tell she was nervous. "Thank you so much for welcoming us. I'm Amy Foster, and this is Jake Miller. We're really excited to be here and learn from everyone." Zixathera's crystal body flashed with what might have been amusement. "Yes, we have heard about your planet. Earth, is it not? A small world in a quiet part of the galaxy. We are curious to see what you might contribute to our studies." Jake felt a little sting from the way Zixathera said small world, but he pushed the feeling away. They were guests here, and he wanted to make a good impression. The group walked along one of the floating pathways toward the main academy building. Other students passed by them, and Jake tried not to stare. He saw beings that looked like walking plants, others that seemed to be made of pure energy, and some that looked almost human except for extra arms or different colored skin. "Our current project focuses on the study of planetary life forms," Krell Nox explained as they walked. "Each team must present research on the most important species from their home world. We will be working together for the next month." They entered a huge room filled with floating desks and chairs that adjusted themselves as students sat down. The ceiling showed a perfect view of the space above the planet, with stars and ships moving slowly across the dark sky. "This is where we will conduct our research," Zixathera said, settling onto a chair that seemed to be made of the same crystal as her body. "Tell us, what do you consider to be your world's most important life forms?" Amy and Jake looked at each other. They had talked about this question during their long trip to Centauri Prime. Jake cleared his throat and began to speak. "Well, humans are obviously important on our world," he said. "But Amy and I think the most interesting creatures on Earth might be the insects." The reaction was immediate. Zixathera's crystal body flashed with bright colors that Jake was pretty sure meant surprise or maybe shock. Krell Nox stopped floating and actually touched the ground with his feet. "Insects?" Zixathera asked. "You mean small pest creatures? Things that buzz around and bother larger life forms?" Amy's cheeks turned red, but she kept her voice steady. "They're much more than pests. Insects are some of the most successful creatures on our planet. They've been around for hundreds of millions of years, and they live in almost every environment on Earth. Krellnox made a sound that might have been laughter. On my world, we have creatures that can swim through gas clouds the size of your entire planet. They communicate using electrical fields that can be felt from thousands of miles away. These are beings worth studying. And on Veltar, Zixthara added, our crystal organisms can think together as one mind while still remaining individuals. They can reshape mountains and create new rivers just by deciding to do so. This is true intelligence and power. Jake felt his face getting hot. I know insects might seem small and unimportant, but they do amazing things too. Some of them build cities, grow their own food, and work together in ways that— Cities? Zixthara interrupted, and her crystal body flashed with colors that definitely meant amusement now. Tiny creatures building cities? How adorable. An old voice spoke from behind them. Perhaps we should not judge too quickly, they all turned to see Professor Velthak approaching their table. The professor was ancient even by galactic standards, with wrinkled gray skin and eyes that seemed to hold the wisdom of 1,000 worlds. Every student in the academy respected him. Professor, Zixthara said, and her mocking tone disappeared immediately. We were just discussing our research assignments. Professor Velthak nodded slowly. Yes, I heard. Earth's insects, was it? He looked at Amy and Jake with interest. How fascinating. I look forward to seeing what you discover. The professor assigned each team to prepare a detailed presentation about their chosen species. They would have 1 week to put together their research and present it to the entire academy. As the professor walked away, Zixthara turned back to Amy and Jake. 1 week should be plenty of time for you to find something more impressive to present than insects, she said. Perhaps you're mammals or birds. Surely Earth has produced something more worthy of galactic attention. Amy looked down at her research tablet, then back up at the crystal alien. No, she said quietly but firmly. We're going to stick with insects. I think you might be surprised by what we find. Krellnox floated higher off the ground, which Jake was starting to realize meant the alien was feeling superior. Very well. But do not expect much interest from the academy when you show us pictures of tiny creatures crawling in the dirt. Jake and Amy spent the rest of the day getting settled in their dormitory and exploring the academy. But as they walked through the beautiful crystal halls, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that they had just made a big mistake. How could Earth's insects possibly compare to crystal beings who could move mountains or sky creatures the size of whales? That night, as Jake lay in his bed looking up at the unfamiliar stars through his window, he wondered if they should change their presentation. Topic. Maybe Zixthara was right. Maybe insects really were just small, unimportant creatures. But then he remembered Amy's words. I think you might be surprised by what we find. Jake smiled in the darkness. Amy knew more about insects than almost anyone on Earth. If she thought they were worth studying, then maybe the aliens were in for a bigger surprise than they realized. The week passed quickly for Jake and Amy. They spent every day in the Academy's research library, which was bigger than any building they had ever seen on Earth. The library had information from thousands of worlds, stored in glowing data crystals, that floated in the air like tiny stars. Amy worked with intense focus, pulling up videos and data files about Earth's insects. Jake helped her organize everything into a presentation that would show the aliens just how wrong they were about these amazing creatures. They practiced their speech over and over until they knew every word by heart. On the other side of the library, Zixthara and Krellnox worked on their own presentations. Sometimes Jake would see them looking over at Amy and him, whispering to each other in their strange languages. The crystal alien's body would flash with colors that Jake was learning meant amusement or mockery. Other students from different worlds also prepared their presentations. Jake met a student who looked like a giant flower and came from a world where plants could think and talk. Another student had fur like a cat, but walked on 2 legs and came from a moon where the gravity was so light that all the animals could fly without wings. Finally, presentation day arrived. The Academy's grand amphitheater was packed with students and teachers from dozens of different worlds. The theater was shaped like a giant bowl, with seats that floated at different levels so everyone could see the stage perfectly. The walls showed pictures of space with real stars twinkling behind them. Professor Velthak walked onto the stage and the entire amphitheater became quiet. Today we will see presentations about the most significant species from each world represented in our exchange program, he announced. His voice carried perfectly to every seat in the huge room. Let us begin with Veltar. Zixthara glided onto the stage, her crystal body catching the lights and throwing rainbow patterns across the walls. She moved her hands, and a huge holographic display appeared above the stage. Citizens of the galaxy, she began, I present to you the crystal formations of Veltar, the most advanced life forms in known space. The hologram showed a world that looked like it was made entirely of living jewels. Massive crystal structures grew out of the ground like trees, but they moved and changed shape as Jake watched. Some crystals were as tall as mountains, reaching up into the purple sky of Veltar. These beings think as one mind while maintaining individual identity, Zixthara explained. Watch as they reshape the landscape through pure thought. The hologram showed thousands of crystal beings working together. As they concentrated, mountains moved like water. Rivers changed direction. Entire valleys formed in minutes as the crystals decided to create new pathways across their world. The audience made sounds of amazement. Jake had to admit it was pretty impressive. The crystal beings could change the shape of their entire planet, just by thinking about it together. Through collective consciousness, they have achieved perfect harmony with their environment, Zixthara continued. They can grow new cities in days, create fresh water sources wherever needed, and even control the weather patterns of their world. When Zixthara finished, the amphitheater burst into applause. Students from different worlds made their own versions of clapping sounds. Some clicked, some hummed, and others flashed lights from their bodies. Next came Krelnox's turn. The floating alien moved onto the stage without touching the ground, and his watery skin seemed to glow under the stage lights. I bring you the sky leviathans of Hyperion's third moon, he announced. The hologram changed to show a world covered in thick gas clouds that swirled in beautiful patterns. Suddenly, something huge moved through the clouds. Jake's mouth fell open as he saw a creature that was bigger than any whale on Earth. It looked like it was swimming through the gas instead of air, its massive body moving with grace and power. These magnificent beings live their entire lives floating through our gas clouds, Krelnox explained. They are larger than your Earth's largest animals, and they possess intelligence that spans continents. The hologram showed more of the creatures. They made sounds that traveled through the gas clouds like songs, reaching other leviathans that were thousands of miles away. Electrical fields surrounded their bodies, creating light shows that were more beautiful than any fireworks Jake had ever seen. They communicate through bioelectrical fields that can be detected across entire hemispheres, Krelnox said proudly. A single thought from one leviathan can reach dozens of others instantly. They share memories, emotions, and knowledge across distances that would require your fastest ship's days to travel. The audience was even more impressed with this presentation. Jake heard students whispering excitedly about the sky leviathans. Even the teachers seemed fascinated by these giant, floating creatures. When Krelnox finished, he looked directly at Jake and Amy with an expression that clearly said, "Beat that." The floating alien was obviously confident that nothing from Earth could compare to creatures that big and impressive. Professor Velthak called Jake and Amy to the stage next. As they walked down the floating steps, Jake could hear whispers and giggles from the audience. Someone said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "Here come the students who think insects are important." More laughter rippled through the amphitheater. Jake felt his face turn red, but Amy walked straight and tall beside him. She had her research tablet in her hands and a determined look on her face. They reached the stage, and Amy stepped up to the speaking area. The holographic display activated, waiting for her to begin. The entire amphitheater was watching them, and Jake could feel hundreds of alien eyes staring at them with amusement. "Citizens of the galaxy," Amy began, her voice clear and strong, despite the mocking whispers. "We present to you the social insects of Earth. The hologram showed a simple picture of an ant. It was small, black, and ordinary-looking. The whispers in the audience grew louder, and Jake heard someone make a sound that was definitely alien laughter. "I know they don't look like much," Amy continued, ignoring the noise from the crowd. "But I want to show you something that might change your mind." She touched her tablet, and the hologram changed. Now it showed thousands of ants moving across the forest floor like a living river. They moved with perfect coordination, each ant knowing exactly where to go and what to do. "These are army ants," Amy explained, "and they're about to show you military tactics that would impress any galactic fleet commander." The laughter in the amphitheater started to quiet down a little. Even Jake, who had seen this footage before, was impressed by how organized the ants looked when viewed from above. The hologram zoomed in to show the ants reaching a small stream. Without any hesitation, hundreds of ants grabbed onto each other with their legs and jaws, forming a living bridge across the water. Other ants ran across this bridge made of their own family members, carrying food and larvae to safety. "Watch, carefully," Jake said, taking over from Amy. "These ants don't have leaders giving orders. No general is telling them what to do. Each ant follows simple rules, but together they create complex strategies that let them overcome any obstacle." The hologram showed the ant bridge changing shape as the stream got wider. More ants joined the bridge, making it longer and stronger. When the stream narrowed again, some ants let go and rejoined the march, making the bridge shorter but keeping it perfectly stable. The whispers in the audience were getting quieter now. Students were leaning forward in their seats, watching more. Carefully, as the ants demonstrated their abilities, Amy smiled as she saw the change in the audience's attention. "This is just the beginning," she said. "What you're seeing here is military engineering, but these ants can do much more than build bridges." The hologram changed again, showing a different type of ant colony. These ants were cutting pieces from green leaves and carrying them like tiny umbrellas over their heads. "These are leafcutter ants," Jake explained, "and they're about to show you something that your advanced civilizations have been doing for thousands of years." He paused for dramatic effect, looking out at the now quiet audience. "They're going to show you agriculture." The amphitheater became completely silent. Even Zixithera's crystal body stopped flashing colors. Agriculture was considered one of the most important signs of advanced civilization throughout the galaxy. Jake and Amy smiled at each other. They were just getting started, and already they had the aliens' complete attention. The real surprises were still to come. The word agriculture hung in the air like a challenge. Every student in the amphitheater knew that growing food was one of the most important steps any civilization could take. It meant planning for the future, understanding complex relationships between different living things, and working together as a society. Amy touched her tablet, and the hologram zoomed in on the leafcutter ants. The audience watched as the ants carried their green leaf pieces down into underground tunnels that went deep into the earth. "Here's what most people don't understand about these ants," Amy said, her voice growing more confident as she saw she had everyone's attention. "They don't eat the leaves they cut." Confused murmurs rippled through the audience. If they didn't eat the leaves, why were they cutting them? The hologram followed the ants underground, showing tunnels that branched out like the roots of a giant tree. The ants carried their leaf pieces into special chambers that were as big as rooms in a house. "Watch what they do with the leaves," Jake said. The ants began chewing the leaves into a soft pulp, but instead of swallowing it, they spread it out on the floor and walls of their underground chambers. Then they did something that made several students in the audience gasp out loud. The ants began planting tiny pieces of fungus in the chewed-up leaves. "They're farmers," Amy explained. "These ants have been growing their own food for over 50 million years. They cut leaves to make compost, then they plant fungus in that compost and take care of it until it's ready to harvest." The hologram showed the ants tending their fungus gardens. Some ants worked to keep the gardens clean, removing any harmful bacteria or mold that might hurt their crops. Others watered the gardens by bringing drops of moisture from outside. Still, others harvested the ripe fungus and carried it to nursery chambers where baby ants were waiting to be fed. Zixithera's crystal body flashed with colors that Jake was learning meant surprise and confusion. "But how do they know to do this?" she asked. Surely they must have leaders who teach them. That's the amazing part, Jake replied. No one teaches them. Each ant is born knowing how to be a farmer. They've been passing this knowledge down through their genes for millions of years. Krellnox floated lower to the ground, which Jake now knew meant the alien was feeling less confident than before. This is unexpected, he admitted. But surely this is the limit of their abilities? Amy smiled and touched her tablet again. The hologram changed to show a different type of insect entirely. These were bees, and they were doing something that made Professor Velthak lean forward in his seat with interest. These are honeybees, Amy said, and they're about to show you a communication system that would make any starship navigator jealous. The hologram zoomed in on a single bee that had just returned to the hive. The bee began moving in a strange pattern on the surface of the honeycomb, walking in a figure-8 shape while waggling its body back and forth. This is called the waggle dance, Jake explained. And it's not just random movement. This bee is giving precise directions to food sources. The hologram showed diagrams explaining what each part of the dance meant. The angle of the dance told other bees which direction to fly compared to the position of the sun. The length of the dance told them how far to travel. The intensity of the waggling told them how good the food source was. Watch this, Amy said excitedly. The hologram showed other bees gathering around the dancing bee, touching her with their antennae and learning the directions. Then it followed. These bees as they flew out of the hive and went straight to the exact food source the first bee had described. The dancing bee can tell her sisters to fly 2 miles northeast, make a left turn at the big oak tree and find the patch of flowers that's hidden behind a rock, Jake said. And they'll find it perfectly, even if they've never been there before. The audience was completely quiet now. Even the most advanced galactic civilizations used complex computer systems to navigate between stars. But these tiny insects were doing it with nothing but a simple dance. But Amy wasn't finished yet. The hologram changed again, this time showing massive structures that rose up from the ground like alien cities. These are termite mounds, Amy announced, and they're about to show you architecture and engineering that rivals anything built by galactic civilizations. The hologram cut through the termite mound like a knife, showing the inside structure. Jake heard several students make sounds of amazement. The mound was filled with tunnels, chambers, and passages that formed a complex 3-dimensional city. This mound is home to over 2 million termites, Jake explained. It has nursery rooms for babies, food storage areas, fungus gardens, and even a special chamber for the queen. But the most impressive part is something you can't see. Amy touched her tablet, and the hologram began showing airflow patterns through the mound. Colored streams of air moved through the tunnels, some going up, others going down, all flowing in perfect patterns. It's an air conditioning system, Amy said proudly. The termites build their mounds with carefully designed ventilation shafts that keep the temperature exactly right all year long. Hot air rises through central chimneys. Cool air comes in through side tunnels, and the whole system works without any fans or machines. The hologram showed the temperature inside the mound staying perfectly steady, while the outside temperature changed from very hot during the day to cool at night. The engineering is so precise that the inside of the mound never varies by more than 1 degree, Jake added. Human buildings need complex heating and cooling systems to achieve the same level of climate control. Krellnox made a sound that might have been disbelief. But surely they must use tools or machines to build such structures. No tools at all, Amy replied. They build everything using just their jaws and legs, carrying one tiny piece of dirt at a time. But somehow they know exactly where each piece needs to go to make the whole system work perfectly. The hologram showed thousands of termites working together, each one carrying a small ball of mud mixed with saliva. They moved with the same perfect coordination that the army ants had shown, but instead of making bridges, they were building a structure more complex than most galactic space stations. Professor Velthak stood up in his seat, something Jake had never seen him do during a presentation before. Fascinating, the old professor said. Please continue. Amy looked at Jake and they both smiled. They could see that the audience was starting to understand that Earth's insects were not the simple pests everyone had thought they were. We're just getting started, Amy said. What we've shown you so far is impressive, but it's nothing compared to what these insects can do when they really work together. She touched her tablet one more time, and the hologram showed a scene that made Zixthera's crystal body flash with colors Jake had never seen before. It was a flood, with water rushing across the land and washing away everything in its path. But floating on top of the water was something that looked like a living raft made entirely of ants. These fire ants are facing a disaster that would wipe out most colonies, Jake said. But watch what they do. The ants had linked their bodies together, using their legs and jaws to create a floating platform that rose and fell with the waves but never sank. On top of this living raft, safe and dry, were the most important members of the colony, including the queen and all the babies. They've turned themselves into a boat, Amy explained. The ants on the bottom will probably drown, but they do it willingly to save their family. And here's the most amazing part. They take turns. The ants on the bottom will switch places with ants from the middle so everyone shares the danger. Equally. The amphitheater was so quiet that Jake could hear his own heartbeat. Students who had been laughing at them an hour ago were now staring at the hologram with expressions of wonder and respect. Zixthera finally spoke, her voice much quieter than before. These creatures, they sacrifice themselves for their colony? Every day, Jake replied. Soldier ants will fight to the death to protect their home. Worker ants will give up their own food to feed their sisters, and when disaster strikes, they'll literally give their lives to save others. Amy nodded. But that's still not the most impressive thing about them. She looked out at the audience, making eye contact with aliens who no longer thought Earth's insects were simple pests. The most impressive thing is that they do all of this without anyone being in charge. The words, "without anyone being in charge," echoed through the amphitheater like a shockwave. Students from dozens of worlds looked at each other with confusion and disbelief. Every civilization in the galaxy had leaders, rulers, or governing systems. The idea of millions of individuals working together perfectly without someone telling them what to do seemed impossible. Zixthera's crystal body flashed with rapid colors that showed she was thinking hard. That cannot be correct, she said firmly. Complex societies require leadership. Someone must give orders, make plans, and organize the work. That's what we thought too, Amy replied with a gentle smile. But these insects prove that there's another way. Jake touched the tablet, and the hologram showed the inside of a massive ant colony. Tunnels and chambers stretched in all directions like the streets of a huge underground city. Millions of ants moved through these passages, each one busy with important work. This colony has 8 million ants, Jake announced. That's bigger than most cities on Earth, but there's no mayor, no government, and no police force. Every ant knows what to do and does it without being told. The hologram followed different groups of ants as they went about their daily work. Some ants were digging new tunnels, expanding the colony as it grew. Others were taking care of baby ants in nursery chambers. Still others were farming fungus gardens or defending the entrances from enemies. But how do they coordinate? Krell Knox asked, floating higher off the ground in his confusion. With 8 million individuals, there must be chaos and confusion. Amy shook her head. Watch carefully. Each ant follows simple rules, but when millions of ants follow the same rules, something amazing happens. The hologram zoomed in on a group of ants that had found a large piece of food too heavy for one ant to carry. Without any discussion or planning, the ants began working together. Some ants grabbed the food while others formed a chain to pass it along. More ants appeared as if from nowhere, all knowing exactly how to help. No ant is giving orders, Jake explained. Each ant just follows basic instructions that are built into their minds. If you see food, try to carry it. If it's too heavy, get help. If you smell the scent trail of other ants, follow it. Simple rules. But when everyone follows them, the whole colony becomes incredibly smart. The hologram showed the food being passed from ant to ant along the most efficient route back to the colony, even though no single ant knew the entire path. The ants had automatically found the best way to solve their problem. This is called emergent intelligence, Amy said. The colony as a whole is much smarter than any individual ant. It can solve problems that would be impossible for one ant to figure out. Professor Velthak leaned forward even more in his seat. Jake could see that the old professor was fascinated by what he was hearing. The hologram changed to show an even more impressive scene. It was a leafcutter ant colony under attack by army ants. The defenders had to protect their home while continuing their normal work of farming and caring for babies. "Watch how they handle this crisis," Amy said. As the army ants approached, the leafcutter colony responded instantly. Soldier ants with huge jaws rushed to the entrances to fight the invaders. Worker ants moved babies and food supplies deeper into the colony where they would be safe. Other ants blocked tunnels with their own bodies to keep enemies from getting inside. But the most amazing part was that the farming ants kept working in their fungus gardens, even during the battle. The colony had divided its attention perfectly, using just enough ants to fight the war, while making sure that daily life could continue. "No general is commanding this battle," Jake pointed out. "No ant is looking at the whole situation and making a battle plan. But somehow the colony is fighting a war and running a city at the same time." The hologram showed the leafcutter ants winning the battle through perfect teamwork. The army ants retreated, and within minutes the colony was back to normal operations. Zixathara was quiet for a long moment, her crystal body cycling through colors that showed deep thought. "This is troubling," she finally said. "My people achieve coordination through our shared crystal consciousness. We think together as one mind, but these ants are separate individuals who somehow act like one mind without being connected." "That's exactly right," Amy said excitedly, "and it gets even more amazing. The hologram changed to show a different type of ant colony. These ants were doing something that made several students in the audience make sounds of disbelief. "These are slave-maker ants," Jake announced, "and they're about to show you warfare tactics that would impress any galactic military commander." The hologram showed a raid in progress. The slave-maker ants had surrounded another ant colony and were attacking with coordinated precision. Some ants created diversions at the main entrance while others snuck in through hidden passages. Still others waited in reserve, ready to help wherever they were needed most. "They're not trying to destroy the other colony," Amy explained. "They're trying to capture young ants to take back to their own nest." The hologram showed the raiders succeeding in their mission, carrying away larvae and pupae from the defeated colony. But instead of eating their captives, the slave-maker ants brought them home and raised them as part of their own family. The captured ants grow up thinking the slave-maker colony is their real home, Jake said. They work willingly for their captors, never knowing they were stolen from another nest. Krelnox made a sound that was definitely shock. "They practice psychological warfare, and slavery, and adoption, and even espionage," Amy replied. "Some ant species send scouts to spy on other colonies before attacking. Others use chemical weapons to confuse their enemies, and some species form alliances with other colonies to fight common enemies." The hologram showed examples of each type of warfare. Ants using poisonous stings to paralyze enemies. Ants releasing chemical signals that made enemy ants attack each other instead of defending their colony. Ants from different species working together to defeat a larger threat. "But here's what makes it really incredible," Jake said. "Remember, all of these complex military strategies are happening without any generals or commanders. Each ant is following simple rules, but together, they create battle plans that would challenge the smartest military minds in the galaxy." The audience was completely silent now. Students who had spent years studying galactic warfare and strategy were staring at tiny insects that had mastered the same skills through pure instinct and teamwork. Amy touched her tablet one more time, and the hologram showed the most impressive sight yet. It was a time-lapse video of an entire ant colony being built from scratch. "This is what happens when a new queen starts a colony," she said. The video showed a single ant digging a small hole in the ground. Over the following days, more ants appeared as the queen's first children grew up. The tiny colony began to expand with new tunnels and chambers appearing as if by magic. But as the weeks and months passed, the simple hole became something extraordinary. The colony grew into a massive underground city with hundreds of chambers, miles of tunnels, and specialized areas for every aspect of ant life. "Watch the pattern," Jake said. See how the tunnels branch out? How the chambers are placed? There's no architect designing this city, but it grows according to rules that create the most efficient possible structure. The time-lapse showed the colony reaching its full size, an underground metropolis that housed millions of ants in perfect organization, highways for fast travel between distant areas, waste disposal systems that kept the colony clean, storage, areas placed exactly where they were needed most. This colony is more efficiently designed than most galactic space stations, Amy said quietly. And it was built by insects with brains smaller than a grain of sand, working without blueprints or planning committees. Professor Velthak stood up again, and this time he began walking down toward the stage. His ancient face showed an expression that Jake had never seen before, complete amazement mixed with something that might have been respect. "Students," the professor said, his voice carrying clearly through the silent amphitheater, "I believe we are witnessing something unprecedented in galactic academic history." He reached the edge of the stage and looked up at Jake and Amy. "You have shown us that intelligence and civilization can take forms we never imagined. These creatures have achieved something that our most advanced societies struggle with every day." Sixthara's crystal body was cycling through colors so rapidly that she looked like a living rainbow. "Professor, what do you mean?" The old professor smiled, an expression that students rarely saw from him. "They have achieved perfect cooperation without losing individual identity. They have created complex societies without oppressive leadership. They have mastered resource management, urban planning, agriculture, warfare, and social organization through pure collective wisdom." He paused and looked around the amphitheater at all the alien students who were hanging on his every word. "In short, these Earth insects have solved the fundamental problems that have caused the collapse of civilizations throughout galactic history." Jake and Amy looked at each other with growing excitement. They could see that something big was about to be revealed, something that would change how everyone thought about Earth and its creatures forever. Professor Velthak walked slowly around the stage, his ancient eyes looking at every student in the amphitheater. The silence was so complete that Jake could hear his own breathing. Everyone was waiting to hear what the professor would say next. "Have something to tell you all," Professor Velthak began, his voice carrying a weight that made Jake feel like something very important was about to happen. "The Galactic Federation has been studying Earth for many years, but not for the reasons you might think." Zixathera's crystal body stopped cycling through colors and became perfectly still. Krelnox actually touched the ground with his feet for the first time since Jake had met him. Students throughout the amphitheater leaned forward in their seats. "We have not been interested in human technology," the professor continued. "Human. Ships are slower than ours. Human computers are less powerful than ours. Human cities are smaller than ours. But Earth has something that we have been trying to understand for decades." He gestured toward the hologram, which still showed the massive ant colony with its millions of inhabitants working in perfect harmony. "Earth has creatures that have mastered the art of civilization itself." A student from the back of the amphitheater called out, "But Professor, surely our civilizations are more advanced than insects." Professor Velthak turned toward the voice with a sad smile. "Are they? Let me tell you about the history of galactic civilizations, and you can judge for yourself." The hologram changed to show a star map of the galaxy. Thousands of points of light marked different worlds and civilizations. "The Veltar Crystal Civilization," the professor said, pointing to Zixthara's home system, "achieved perfect harmony through shared consciousness. But this same connection made them vulnerable. When a disease attacked their crystal networks 300 years ago, it spread through their linked minds like wildfire. Half their population died in a single day because they were too connected to each other." Zixthara's body flashed with colors that Jake now recognized as pain and sadness. She had never heard this part of her world's history before. "The sky leviathans of Hyperion," Professor Velthak continued, gesturing toward Krelnox's home system, "created a beautiful society of giant beings who could communicate across vast distances, but their size became their weakness. When their gas clouds began to thin due to stellar changes, the leviathans were too large to adapt quickly. They are now a dying species, slowly starving as their world changes around them." Krelnox sank down until he was sitting on the ground, his watery features showing shock and grief. This is the pattern throughout galactic history, the professor explained. Civilizations rise and become powerful, but they always carry the seeds of their own destruction. Some become too rigid and cannot change. Others become too chaotic and tear themselves apart. Still others become too dependent on technology and collapse when their machines fail. He walked back to where Jake and Amy stood on the stage. But Earth's social insects have found a different path. They have created societies that are both stable and flexible, both organized and free, both cooperative and individual. They have been using the same successful strategies for hundreds of millions of years. Amy found her voice and asked the question that everyone was thinking. Professor, are you saying that the Federation has been studying insects this whole time? Not just studying, Professor Velthak replied. We have been trying to learn from them. The greatest problem facing every galactic civilization is the same problem that has destroyed countless societies throughout history: how to create a group that works together without losing individual freedom. The hologram showed examples from across the galaxy. Civilizations that had become so controlling that their people rebelled and destroyed everything. Others that had given so much freedom to individuals that society fell apart into chaos. Still others that had tried to find a middle path but had failed and collapsed anyway. Your insects solved this problem billions of years ago, the professor said. Each ant is completely free to make its own choices, but those choices naturally lead to cooperation and harmony. No force is needed, no punishment is required. The system works because it benefits everyone. Jake felt a surge of pride for the tiny creatures from his homeworld. But Professor, how can galactic civilizations learn from insects? We're so different from them. Professor Velthak smiled, and this time his expression was full of hope instead of sadness. That is exactly what we hope to discover. The Federation has been waiting for humans to join us because you share your world with these remarkable creatures. You have grown up alongside them. Perhaps you can help us understand what they can teach us. Zixathera spoke up, her voice much quieter and more respectful than it had been a week ago. Professor, I want to apologize to Jake and Amy. I was wrong to look down on their world and their creatures. I see now that there is wisdom in these insects that my people need to learn. Krelnox nodded, still sitting on the ground. My people are dying because we cannot adapt to change. But these ants have survived ice ages, meteor impacts, and countless disasters by being flexible while staying united. We need to understand how they do it. Other students throughout the amphitheater began speaking up. A plant-like student from a world where cooperation was impossible said she wanted to study how ants work together despite being individuals. A cat-like student from a world where everyone fought constantly asked how ants avoided the wars that plagued his people. Professor Velthak raised his hand for silence. This is why the Academy is announcing a new research program today. We will be creating the Terrestrial Social Systems Research Institute, dedicated to studying Earth's social insects and what they can teach galactic civilization. He turned to Jake and Amy. And we would like you two to serve as the directors of this new institute. Jake's mouth fell open so wide that Amy had to gently close it for him. Us? Amy stammered. But we're just students. You are students who understand something that the greatest minds in the galaxy have been trying to figure out for thousands of years. Professor Velthak replied. You know these creatures not just as subjects of study, but as neighbors and fellow inhabitants of your world. The professor gestured toward the audience. Every student here will have the opportunity to join this research program. We will study how ant colonies make decisions without leaders, how they allocate resources without waste, how they respond to threats without panic, how they grow and change without losing their essential character. Amy looked at Jake, and both of them grinned with excitement. They had come to the Academy hoping to learn from advanced alien civilizations, but instead they were going to teach those civilizations about the amazing creatures from their own backyard. There is one more thing, Professor Velthak said. The Federation Council has decided that Earth will be given a special status in our organization. Instead of being a junior member trying to catch up with more advanced worlds, Earth will be recognized as the keeper of ancient wisdom that we all need to learn. The amphitheater erupted in cheers and applause. Students from dozens of worlds were clapping, clicking, humming, and flashing lights in celebration. But the loudest sounds came from Zixthera and Krelnox, who had become Jake and Amy's biggest supporters. As the celebration continued, Professor Velthak walked over to Jake and Amy and spoke quietly so only they could hear. "You have done something remarkable today," he said. "You have shown the galaxy that intelligence comes in many forms and that the smallest creatures can teach the greatest lessons. Your insects have given us hope that civilizations can find a better way to live together." Jake looked out at the celebrating students and felt a warm glow of pride. Back home on Earth, people mostly thought of ants as pests that ruined picnics and got into kitchen cabinets. But here, among the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy, those same ants were being recognized as teachers and guides for the future. Amy squeezed Jake's hand and whispered, "Wait until we tell them about the bees' democracy and the termites' air conditioning systems. We haven't even started showing them the really impressive stuff yet." Jake laughed and squeezed back. They had come to the academy as students, but they were leaving as teachers, and their classroom would be filled with alien minds eager to learn the ancient secrets of Earth's tiniest inhabitants. The galaxy would never look at insects the same way again, and more importantly, the galaxy would never look at cooperation, intelligence, and civilization the same way either. Professor Velthak's final words echoed in Jake's mind as the celebration continued around them. The greatest intelligence is not always found in the largest brains, but in the most efficient societies. Earth's insects have mastered what we have spent millennia trying to achieve: perfect cooperation without sacrificing individual purpose. As Jake watched alien students from across the galaxy discussing ant colonies with the same respect they once reserved for crystal beings and sky leviathans, he realized that sometimes the most important discoveries come from looking more carefully at the things that have been right in front of you all along.